In this world, there are winners and losers. Or more accurately maybe, big guys and little guys. The same is true of ITV. You'll know your Granadas and your Thameses, your LWTs and your ATVs. But almost forgotten on the national stage are the TSWs, the Ulsters, the Tyne Teases. But to the people who live in their catchment area, they are just as important as any central independent television. This edition of ITV in the Face pays tribute to some of those companies that, quite frankly, couldn't fill half an hour if they tried. First up is that quintessential minor, Border Television. Border Television got its start fairly late in the day, with the franchise only being created in 1960 for transmission to begin in the middle of 1961. The region itself consisted of a few miscellaneous counties at the very top end of England and the very bottom end of Scotland. Cumbria and Northumberland, or Westmoreland and Cumberland, as they were known at the time, and Dumfries and Galloway and that sort of thing. Later on their purview was increased to include the Isle of Man. The new service involved two transmitters, one at Caldbeck near Carlisle and one at Selkirk. Before they decided to create a whole new franchise area, the ITA did consider requests from Scottish Television to take over the one at Selkirk, and Granada and ABC to take over the one near Carlisle. Ultimately, they decided that was a bit too much like expansionism and created a whole new region and a franchise to govern it, which was awarded to a consortium involving a roughly 50-50 split between local faces and broadcasting heavyweights like the chairman of Reuters at the time. And so it began.
This is Border Television, broadcasting to Cumbria, South Scotland, the Isle of Man and north and west Northumberland, from the Caldbeck, Selkirk and associated transmitters of the Independent Broadcasting Authority.
The Border logo was deliberately abstract. On one level, as TV Cream once put it, it's obviously a B for border. Kind of. The D shape represents the catchment area, while the forked bit in the middle is the border itself. Now, Border was never the richest region in the ITV network, and by never the richest, I mean almost always the poorest. This static black and white caption lasted throughout the 60s and well into the 70s, and it's replaced with this. That's right, a static, silent colour ident. And by colour, I mean a blue background instead of a black one. This one came along fairly late in the day, Border being one of the last regions to manage to make the switch to colour. There's something vaguely resigned about this ident, almost as if it's saying, well, here we are, living in Cumbria. It's wet and it's cold and it's windy. Half of us have the black lung and the rest of us are unemployed. But that's just how it is, and now the weather. Added to this, as far as I could tell, is the fact that there was absolutely no in-vision continuity to speak of. Just this motionless, musicless caption, often without an announcement at all. And this lasted almost up to the 90s, with the only significant change coming somewhere in the 80s, with the word colour being dropped from the caption, because by then, even in the Border region, it went without saying.
Good morning, this is ITV Border on Thursday the 9th of November.
Ah! Movement! Animation! Music! What is this? Border were probably the only region to benefit from the 1989 generic logo, which they kept until 1993, despite the fact that, as was altogether too common, their logo no longer looked like anything in the final form-up. The amount of times I've had to say that during this series suggests it might be something of a design flaw. Border kept it for 4 years, longer than anyone save Grampian, who barely had time to finally drop it in 1999 before being acquired by STV, but that's another episode. Thus, 1993 saw Border's first ever animated and properly coloured ident that they made themselves. It's entirely possible that they were able to afford the animation and the pastel colours by not spending a penny on the music.
Good morning and welcome to Programmes on Border.
Quite a pleasant ident, really. Very reminiscent, but nicely so, of a sort of generic backdrop to a bigger channel set of trailers for their spring season programming. There's a sort of freshness about it. A Glade plug-in kind of freshness, but freshness all the same. Most importantly, and generic ident notwithstanding, Border finally seemed like a proper channel in its own right, on the same level as all the others. This particular ident only lasted a couple of years, however, before they got wind of the mid-90s fashion for gigantic silvery artefacts suspended in undulating blue backdrops. For the first time, they even provided their own music, if not their own tune. Looking very relaxed, Adolf Hitler on vibes. The animation was adapted very slightly a few years later to make it look a bit more authoritative and broadcastery and a bit less wet. Yes, that's right, they even composed their own music for it. The first and only unique Border ident music. They even dabbled in in-vision continuity, nearly a decade after almost everyone else had given it up. I can't show you it in motion, but here's a picture. Border must have been the last television channel to position themselves as your friends who live in a television. The kind of matey announcers on Channel 4 and Sky notwithstanding, it's much easier to come across as friendly when A, you're not trying so obviously hard, and B, we can see your face. Fortunately, it was only a couple of years later that ITV's Invasion of the Body Snatchers landed, and Border were frankly even worse done by than anyone else, because they didn't even get to keep their symbol, being reduced to just a single word, Border, almost as a panacea to the inevitable deregionalisation which was in progress. Even death brings no respite for poor old Border, and as a couple of years ago the then new and now outgoing ITV chairman, Michael Grade, announced his plans to destroy what remained of the old regional ITV, saying Border in particular no longer made sense. And a few months ago, February 2009, Border's operations, though not its franchise, were nailed to those of Tyne Tees, the other bitch network, in a new non-franchise region called ITV Shut Up and Sit Down. Border's new service was closed down, and the region is now served from Gateshead, much like my region is now run from Bristol, because, you know, Bristol, Cornwall, there's only 160 odd miles between them. You know, the Bristol accent is very much similar to a Cornish accent. You can tell a bloody difference. Everyone just blobs our carbon and they can't just see him on the barb ratings, don't they? Yes, well. Our next stop actually is part of my region, at least as far as the BBC are concerned. Completely the opposite end of the country to where we were before. Say hello to the Channel Islands.